Hello there, welcome to a Fantasy Grounds tutorial with Ungainly Titan. I've been a long time D&D player, and I've been DMing online for a few years now on various platforms, most recently on Fantasy Grounds 2. However, my DMing career was cut short because of the increasing congestion on my ISP. My players couldn't understand what I was saying half the time when I had a lot of people on the table. So my buddy Ian has running, and he's an experienced DM, but not experienced in running Fantasy Grounds or online media. So this tutorial is for him. I do not claim to be an expert on Fantasy Grounds, nor do I claim is this the best way to do it, but this is kind of the way I do it. So here we are in the create campaign screen. So I'm going to use the Slaver's Stone, which is actually a 4th edition Chaos Scar, Keep on the Chaos Scar adventure that I was running once upon a time, and then my players decided they didn't like 4th edition, and we stopped actually in the middle of this adventure. So here we have the basic DM layout for Fantasy Grounds, and I'm mostly going to concentrate on the story elements, and I'm going to show how I set up the story elements, how I create an encounter, and that should cover the basics. So we start off, we create a story element, and I use one to create the kind of a table of contents. So I've already referenced to all the elements in that campaign. I also generally create, when I start running a campaign, a separate one that will have my DM notes. So this is the PDF of the Slaver's Stone, and we just highlight stuff in the text. So as soon as I can figure out how to do it, so I highlight the text. You can right click and copy, or Control C, and when you come into Fantasy Grounds, you can create a story element. So we have the background that we've just copied in, and then we Control V. Now you don't get an option to paste if you use the context menus. What you get is also loses any formatting, but if you want, you can go through it and format it yourself. So as you can see, once I create the story element, I just drag it into my table of contents, and I drag the table of contents title into the story element, so that in a crowded screen, when I have maps and lots of character sheets and all sorts of stuff opened up, I can find my way back to the table of contents without having to go back to the story panel, because the story complete campaign might have 100 of these little entries. So you just keep doing this for each of the elements in the adventure, and similarly for your campaign. And you can flesh out an entire campaign in this way as a series of adventures, or whatever way you want. You can key it off of either a story element, like I'm doing here, or you can key it off of a background map as well, or both. It's quite flexible in that sense if you're creating your own adventures. Now we're just going to look at creating a quest, which is a specific thing that gives you experience. So I've already created a quest, but just create a new quest. I just paste the text in from my quest so that I know what the quest is about, and I just type in the title. And since I know the size of my party, I can allocate the XP straight away, because I know how many players I'm going to have, and I just allocate the XP, and that's the quest. Later on, I can drag and drop that quest item into the party sheet, and that will allow me to allocate the experience to the party when they've completed the quest. Now I'm going to deal with extracting a map from the PDF. So I've just used the Windows 10 image snip tool just to take a portion of the screen rather than taking an entire screenshot. But a screenshot will do, and you can use an image manipulation package to extract the image or enhance it if you want to. And then I just save it. And once I have the image saved, I can go back to Fantasy Grounds, and I just need to clear up the clutter on my UI, get rid of a lot of the stuff so that I can get at the menus at the side. And because I need to open the maps and images item and just drag the map into it. And once that map's in it, I can then drag that map onto the table of contents, and I can drag encounters and stuff onto the map. So here is the map inside in the Fantasy Grounds application, and you can resize it and you can enhance it and zoom into it and all the rest of it. So we just put that aside for the moment, and we're going to create an encounter. So we're back into the encounter section, and we just create a new encounter. We give the encounter a name, Escape Prisoner. Now I've already created the story element for Escape Prisoner, which gives me the background and DM notes for the Escape Prisoner encounter, and that is copied and pasted as before from the PDF of the adventure. So now I have the Escape Prisoner encounter created, and I need to find some monsters. So I hadn't actually my library set up, so the next thing I need to do is go down into the library and go to the modules. And then I need to open the relevant books that I'm going to use in the campaign. Once I've opened the relevant data modules and set permissions to who can see it and all the rest of it, in the data module activation section, I can go back into the library and I should see the various books that are now available, and guides and whatever that I've purchased. So I can, if you buy 4th edition, say, or campaign guides or adventures, they'll also appear here, and you can activate them and use encounters from them as well. And all the text of the adventures will appear already set up in the game for you, but the default organization in purchase adventures will be different, obviously, to what I use. So I went into the monster manual, and then I realized I don't know exactly what level of encounter I'm going to set up, because 4th edition is different. So I can use the 4th edition guideline as a reference to whether it's a hard, easy, or difficult encounter, and then I can go find the relevant section in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Couldn't quite remember where it was, but you can go to the reference section of any of the books, and you get the full text of the Dungeon Master's Guide in this case. So eventually I'm going to find the Creating Combat Encounter, which is what I'm looking for. So here's the table giving the experience budget depending on how hard you want to encounter by character level for a single character. And you also get information modifying this. So if you have a lot of monsters, it might be twice as difficult, and that will affect your XP budget. So now that we've established our XP budget, we can go back into the Dungeon Master, into the Monster Manual, and we can look up orcs and see what the XP of orcs are, and those are 100 XP. So we can then decide how many orcs we want. And once we've set our encounter difficulty, so we just drag the orc in here into the Escape Prisoner encounter, and then we just set the number. So we can put this any number, and once we've set the number, that's more or less the encounter set up. Could just drag the Escape Prisoner encounter into the Escape Prisoner story element, and when the time comes, just click the button down at the bottom that I'm there when you open up the encounter, and the monsters will automatically appear in the combat tracker, and you could run the combat as a pure theatre of the mind. Now, but you can also set up a map. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a map that's already provided by Fantasy Grounds. Just a matter of finding one that is suitable, because it's an outdoor combat. So we just use this outdoor map and we declare that this is going to be our combat map. Any map asset, you can drag in another piece of artwork that you find on the internet or that you've drawn yourself using your third-party map creation software or an image creation software, and just drag it into the images the way I did previously for the map from the PDF, and add the map that way as well. So I'm at the moment putting the map on the way, which is the initial stage of the adventure, but it's probably not the best way to organize it, and I'll actually rearrange that later on. So now we have the Chaos Scar area map, and the escaped prisoners encounter is going to be an encounter on that map, and it takes place in some location. So we just drag the encounter down and it drops a pin on the map. That's now a hyperlink to the story element for the encounter. And as a DM, you can move that pin around the map, so you can choose to have the encounter anywhere that you think might be most useful to have it. So you can similarly now, I'm just reorganizing it there a bit, because the other part of this encounter, of course, is there's an escaped prisoner. So we need the escaped prisoner, and I'm going to use a commoner. So we just drag the commoner onto the encounter. And therefore I need to unlock it. We drag the commoner in, it doesn't work, so I unlock it, I drag the commoner in. Now the commoner actually has a name in the encounter. So if we go to the story mode, we find out what the character's name is. So Alison is now going to be the commoner, and we just put her name in. And we make her friendly, and I could also make the orcs hostile from the get-go, if that's what I want to do. So we pull out the map that we've decided to use, and we move it over, and we just put Alison down. But then I realize I don't have a grid set for this map, so the next thing we do is we set the grid. So we go into the menus and set the grid option, and you just drag across whatever you think is an appropriate size. If the map has a grid already on it, then you'll have to match as best you can the existing grid. So it's easier if you zoom in and set the grid size, and it's not great, but it's close enough, you know, we'll live with it. But once you have a grid set, the tokens scale to the grid size. So these are medium creatures, they take up a full square. If you had large creatures, they would take up more than one square, huge, gargantuan, and so on. And we deploy the initial settings. So now if we put the escaped prisoner into the combat tracker and open the map, the characters, the various people are already pre-positioned, so we just set the players up depending on their direction of entry. And by default, I think hostiles are hidden. I'm not sure why Alison is visible, because I think probably because she's friendly. I could set her up as a separate faction as well, and I think she would be hidden in as well. Depending on how you want to run the encounter, you may or may not want people to be hidden from the get-go. So here lies my mistake in terms of the organization of the encounter. So I'm going to move the encounter and the map onto the escape prisoner story element, and I also want to link this obviously to the Chaos Scar table of contents, and that is an encounter setup, and it's connected to the map, and it's connected to the main map. That is essentially how you do it. You just keep doing that until you've completed the adventure. You can create treasure parcels by dragging items from the DMG or any other source, or just creating items that you want completely out of the whole cloth, and then putting them together into a treasure parcel in a similar way to that a quest item was created. They can be then added to the party sheet at the end to award them to the party, and they become part of the party inventory. So that's it, the basics of how to set up a campaign in Fantasy Grounds. Hope you found that interesting. Hope it's useful, and anybody, please consider giving the video a like if you found it useful, and please consider giving the channel a subscription. And thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again soon.